Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing Random Acts of Violence. So Random Acts of Violence is a film that just premiered recently on Shudder, and it is a more traditional kind of slasher psychological horror film that's written and starring Jay Baruchel. Really interesting seeing some of these new horror movies that are being directed or written or produced by some really big kind of comedic icons. And this is another interesting entry into that whole wave of films. So basically the story of this film that is based on a comic book from 2010 is about a comic book creator. He made this very successful horror comic and he's traveling around trying to promote his comic, trying to help figure out a way to write the end of his story. And he's following along this area where there's a lot of murders happening. And lo and behold, someone decides to start acting out the different things that are going on in his comic book. And it becomes kind of a thing where he's being haunted and tortured by his own creation, which is a really interesting concept. And the movie takes it to another level, particularly in the last act of the film. But it's still really, really simplistic. And the idea, while it is interesting on its face, isn't the best executed thing. I will say that this movie is extremely gruesome and violent at times. It definitely takes it up another notch when it comes to the gore factor in certain scenes that involve the killer actually killing the people and kind of putting them in these macabre situations. As far as the acting goes, none of the characters really have a lot to do, except for the main character, Todd, who's played by Jesse Williams. He does get to have a pretty big arc and a pretty substantial emotional toll on him as the movie goes along. I thought he really excels in the last couple scenes, and you really start to unravel what's going on with him and his kind of catharsis of creating this comic and kind of his connection to everything that's happening. I thought that was well executed. I think it kind of has a good payoff at the end of the movie. You get to the very end and you're kind of surprised at what's happening. It doesn't make 100% sense to me, and it kind of turns its own messaging on its head at the end, because it is kind of along the way telling an idea of glorifying violence and how that affects the people that actually are affected by real life serial killers, and how horror type media can kind of influence people in a negative way. You get a little bit unraveling towards the end of the film that involves the actual creation of the comic and how that influences someone in the movie. Don't want to give too much away because I feel like it is kind of a big spoiler to talk about the very end of the movie. And I think it's a kind of a surprising twist. Not the greatest thing in the world, but a decent payoff. I definitely wasn't expecting it to go the direction that it did. And as far as cinematography goes, this movie is definitely very stylistic. It's done in a very gritty and grungy looking atmosphere. It even has a lot of strange filters and lighting they use throughout to create kind of an uneasy mood to the film. Also, they take time when the killer's involved to kind of have a very kinetic and frantic camera. It spins around a lot, it's moving around a lot of style involved in those scenes in particular. One thing I thought that was interesting that I like, because I was a big fan of the show Creepshow, is when it kind of cuts to a more comic-esque look. It goes back and forth at times, especially with flashbacks and images that are popping up in Todd's head as he's thinking about his comic, thinking about these killings. You go to an animated style, and I liked when they would switch back and forth from that. I also like that there's a really long flashback scene that happens. You get little pieces of it throughout the film, and when you get kind of the full picture of what's happening at the end, I thought that was well executed. I think it creates a interesting connection between the characters. While most of the movie you don't really care a lot about them, you don't really know a lot about them, but by the end you become more invested, particularly in Todd's character. So if I were to rate this movie, I would actually give it a 6 out of 10. Definitely a solid outing, a solid effort. Not the most creative thing I've ever seen. Kind of plain as the movie goes along, but I did like the ending. I thought the third act was pretty well executed. And I think the acting, particularly by the part of Jesse Williams, was pretty solid. Not the best horror acting I've ever seen from everyone involved. It definitely could have had more to it. It is a pretty short movie. It's a pretty short runtime. But overall, slightly above average. Not amazing, not the greatest thing I've seen on Shudder or anything else I've watched, but definitely worth checking out if you want to see kind of a gritty, gruesome serial killer type movie. So if you've checked out this movie, let me know. And also, if there's anything that you would want me to check out on Shudder, I mean, I just got it back recently. I've been trying to look at some of the things that are new to the platform, things that are maybe original to the platform. So if there's anything that you'd like to see me review, comment down below. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.